Who's going to execute the agenda? Perfect. Carolyn, go for it. Welcome to April 23rd, 2018 meeting of Kubernetes SIG service catalog. Carolyn is going to execute the agenda. Go for it.
Hey. I don't know if we have any new people on today, but the way this works is that I'll kind of walk through our agenda up here. Let me paste the link. If there's something you want to talk about, add it there and slap your name on it, and we'll just walk on through. If you have a question or you want to comment or say something, sometimes it's hard to interrupt people, so just type +hand, and I'll help move things along and call on people. Yeah. Cool. So let's start with Jeremy talking about what happened last Friday.
All right, good times. So, like right now, we have this situation where the Helm chart that we use to install service catalog, and then we tell people to use to install service catalog, seems to be updated on every commit, not when we do a release. So there was this big PR that went in that rebased all of the aggregated API server stuff off of 110, which introduced some breaking changes. But when that got merged, we didn't do a release, so the version of service catalog in the chart was still like v0114, which didn't have the new flags. And like trying to track this down, it's not apparent to a lot of us where that Helm publish or Helm repo sync is happening. And it seems like in general, we have an opportunity to revise and like revisit what we're doing for CI to make it more transparent so that everybody can understand it. Maybe have everything baselined in the repository, and that drives whatever builds Travis or Jenkins. We can figure out why we're using Travis and Jenkins instead of just one. Maybe look at moving to prow now. I think like coincidentally with that, figuring out what the release process should look like. What do we document in terms of what's the minimum version of Kubernetes that we support? For instance, I can't install service catalog on, I can install service catalog on like a 1.8 cluster, but I can't install any brokers on it. So I did a brand new 1.8.10 Minikube cluster, installed service catalog, and then I'm not able to install OSBA or the UPS broker. I get this cluster service brokers.service catalog.case.io, then whatever the resource name is forbidden, not yet ready to handle requests. And that happens with bindings, like anything you try to create. The things are registered there, but they're not available. Like I can do a kubectl get on the resource name and it'll tell me there's nothing, but the minute that I try to create one, I get this kind of opaque error message. And that didn't happen until we moved to v0115, which includes all of the 110 changes. So it seems like there might be some potentially breaking things between supporting 1.8 and anything past 1.8. So I just think like in general, there's an opportunity or a need for us to kind of figure out what the CI stuff's gonna look like, what releases are gonna look like, hammer all that out, and then move to a new thing.
And prow.
And prow.
Okay, so I was just suggesting that maybe we start a working group for like the next couple weeks, just for helping people to organize around bringing everything back into the repo related to our CI, and if there's missing doc on how stuff works, we'll throw that in. Or what's required. Sounds like it wasn't clear.
Yeah, so I would say that like probably the most salient part of like what we've just talked through is specificity around which versions of Kubernetes are supported. And I think that depends on how far back we want to support. If I remember correctly, there's something about the aggregator that changed that we require at least 1.9. I'm personally not certain that there is much value to be had in supporting more than one older release, like current release and current -1. But it depends on what the group wants to do. I'm definitely supportive of making this very
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't think there's a lot of utility in supporting a lot of older versions, but I think it should be clear we support current -1 or something, just so that people know when they're consuming service catalog what their minimum requirements are.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I think as far as CI goes, I think the most immediate thing we should fix is that publish of the Helm chart, because this could happen tomorrow. Like if we make some sort of change to the Helm chart tomorrow and it gets merged in, we're gonna have the same problem where it could be a breaking change vis-a-vis the released image. So I think that's what we need to fix first. And it seems like that's some sort of magical internal Google thing on the Jenkins instance that Vic may be the only one that knows how to do. So he's willing to talk to us tomorrow to figure out what we need to do or what the right way to fix that like immediate problem is. But still, it's not really clear to me. I don't think anybody else really how that's working right now. So I think that's like the most immediate thing we should fix.
It is not clear to me at all, just for the record. I don't know what Vic did at all.
So it sounds like if anyone's interested, maybe Jeremy, can you send an invite and let people know when that meeting is with Vic?
Yeah, sure.
So you want to send the invite to everyone, and then we'll form the working group after that once we.
Yeah, I think that's the best idea. I mean, I'll forward it to the whole list, and then anybody that's interested can join, and then we'll kind of spin the working group off of that. I think Scott created a milestone, and then added a couple. Like we had 2 issues. I made a make CI better issue, and he made a make prow happen issue. So we can try to track things and build out of that.
Yeah, I think our issues come from our snowflakiness. And so if we move on to something standard that Kubernetes is using, then I think some of these problems will go away.
Cool. Sounds like everyone's in agreement. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is the road to GA. So I volunteered last week to go through and update everything from the face-to-face and kind of put that on our 1.0 milestone in GitHub. And then I kind of realized that maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, so I want to talk to you about it first. If I could, can I share my screen real quick so I can show you what I've done so far? So I updated our wiki page, which had a roadmap, and I went through and marked off with a little key here for like what's been implemented, what I'm not quite sure if we're ready to call it done or not, and then things that I don't think anymore seem to be on our 1.0 milestone, but was originally over a year ago. So I went through and updated all of this, and if we agree on that, then I can go through and start updating the milestones and GitHub, but I didn't want to start trashing stuff because it wasn't quite clear for everything. Trying to find some of the questions. Like, so for example, I think the only one I was still confused on is RBAC for individual service visibility. This was flagged for 1.0, but I have no clue what the status is of this and if we still want to do it, or is this already a thing, or is it all covered by the whitelisting?
I think this was originally around sharing service instances. Oh, I'm sorry. No, this is for service classes. I think this pertains to the idea that once upon a time there was a discussion around trying to do ACL filtering on the cluster scoped resources, which, as we all know, is impossible. So, unless there are objections, we should probably close that one.
Yeah, I think the namespace version of our stuff should probably solve that one, I would think.
Yeah.
Does that solve these other ones then? On here we had RBAC for instances as well. Is that something that falls off completely? Is it?
So RBAC gives you the next two. In the sense of which service accounts can provision and which can bind, but not to a specific instance. That's really not what RBAC was designed to do. I would be happy to continue or restart thinking about that, but I don't think that we should gate ODA or 1.0 on that. Those sound like very advanced ACL filter type use cases to me.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't care if any of this goes into 1.0. I just was flagging stuff that at one point we said we wanted, and before I rip all this off and kind of change the plan of record, I want to make sure that people agree. The other one was we had all code coverage and doc standards met, and it's decided in some magical
O.3. Yeah, I'm not touching that one. I'm muting now.
Okay, cool. And then I guess I had one other question, which was about the scope of 1.0 versus some of our other smaller releases. Like, are we going to have more minors before 1.0?
So
is it safe to slot things for 1.0 if maybe it'll come sooner?
So what I would say is that I think we should consider releasing O.2 after namespace brokers are in, because what I have heard from customers and folks in the community is that they think the concept's really neat. For different reasons, I think a lot of folks are hesitant to use Service Catalog until we have namespace scope brokers, and it feels weird to go from O.1 to 1.0. That's atypical. I think a good milestone for O.2 would be namespace scope brokers are in. What do folks think about that?
Sorry, I missed people's hands because I was talking. Is SIG Service Catalog Morgan?
There's two of us. One's me and one's Morgan.
All right, someone put their hand up.
That was me, but then I started talking.
Okay, Jeremy?
No, I was just voting. +1.
Okay, Doug, you have your hand up next.
Yeah, just for clarity, if we go to 0.2, that doesn't change us at all in terms of our status, beta versus alpha rates like that, right? We're still at the same level.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think we've done quite a bit since O.1, and we should let people know via like O.2 that something has happened, especially because I think that O.2 would be something that folks would, that would probably attract users that haven't been willing to install it in the past because they felt like it needed namespace brokers.
Yeah, I think namespace brokers is a very large enough feature that warrants a 0.2, so I agree.
Michael, you have your hand up?
So one question is, when are the namespace when is that work estimated to be complete? And second question is, would we move our API version to V1 Beta 2 at O.2, or are those two uncoupled? Yeah,
so those are orthogonal. In terms of the namespace scope broker stuff, the API surface is mostly in. I believe that Eric Nelson had some internal things that he had to work on last week, but he told me that he was resuming work on the control loops for the namespace scope stuff today. So I would imagine that in the next 2, possibly 3 weeks, we'd be looking at those being complete.
Jeremy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so I'm making SVCat changes in parallel to that. I should have them done this week.
Yes.
And to answer the second part of your question, Michael, we do not need to bump the API version to V1 Beta 2. We would really only need to do that if we made incompatible changes to the V1 Beta 1 API. Since we haven't done that, and I thank you all for not having done that, we do not need to bump the API version.
Cool. I'll update the notes with what we just decided to push out and shoot for 2 and 1.0, and then I will copy everything over from the 1.0 roadmap wiki onto this milestone and update existing issues. There's a couple issues that need to be created as well, so I will make them if they still don't exist yet for stuff like generic actions and generic broker actions. Yeah. Next up is New Scott.
Howdy, howdy. So I posted a CL with a proposal to get some feedback, and I don't know if anyone read it or gave feedback yet. I looked at the original. I think Niall produced a CRD as a backing store CL or PR, and it looked like it was pretty complicated. So mine's going to be a little simpler. His originally allowed you to specify what namespace the CR was stored in, and this change is going to be they get stored wherever service catalogs are running in that.
So Scott, one thing that
service catalog, then maybe it.
One thing that I think is relevant, which I'm not certain if you're aware of, is that CRDs can be cluster scoped now. They do not have to be namespace scoped. So for the cluster scope resources, it's probably a better fit to put them into cluster scoped CRDs. And then you don't have to answer this question of which namespace do they go into.
Let me keep looking into it. I'm still working on this proposal, but I just wanted to bring it to the group, and this work is happening on my side where I'm starting to explore how to solve this problem. But yeah, any input like that is super valuable. And I don't really, that's all. I just like, hey, here's a doc. Please come help me solve this problem. Also, I made a logo. It's super good. Okay, EOF.
Okay, Kibbles, your hand went down. Is there anything else on that before we move on to a demo of minibroker? No? Okay, cool. I'll share my screen again because I want to show this. It's pretty cool. So a little background on minibroker. And this is not a unique idea. This has been tried a couple times and just didn't get very far. The idea for minibroker is it's a mini broker for your mini cube, and it lets you provision stable Helm charts from upstream using service catalog, and it's a little broker that kind of lets you do that. And I finally got it to the point where it actually kind of works, which is fun. Which is fun. It works for installing WordPress, MySQL, MariaDB, and Postgres. Oh dear, I can't watch chats at the same time. If people are putting their hands up, someone else is going to have to help doing stuff. And so what it does is it actually has a sidecar of Tiller. So it has its own private Tiller. No one can access it or use it or anything like that. And then it talks directly to Tiller and provisions stuff for you. So if I do get, let me make this like way bigger. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. So if I do get classes, these are all the different upstream charts that are just in stable. So I have a MySQL chart. I can take a look at it. And I have one plan. I can't do dots in plan names. So this is version 5.7.14. And then I could just provision it, you know, as we can. Provision demo. 5-7-14. And it'll make it super fast because there's no real cloud. It's just making it in a container next to you on your cluster. So if we take a look at what that made there, I'm also going to show a new feature in SVCat that I'm trying to get merged. So if you want this to see this in the next release, give me another looks good. If I look at my demo binding, oops, I got to bind it first. Bind demo. This is synchronous at the moment. I wasn't trying to bite off async at the same time too. Okay, so now if I describe it, it's going to list out my secret keys as well. Slowly. Damn it, minibroker, stop making me look bad. Sadness. So there it is. Scribe secret demo. And so it makes all the different pieces of it. You can see these were some of the original things that came out of the chart, and I just shove them in anyways. And otherwise, so we split it out so that it follows the standard credentials that OSB spec needs. So what this ends up,
one again.
Sorry?
I said run the SVCat one. It looked like you just were too fast for it.
Ah, okay, there we go. Yeah, it doesn't show the secret data until the secret is injected. So sometimes it's a little slow. I have an open PR to have like a magical flag with lots of warnings on it that instead of telling you 10 bytes, will actually decode it and just show it to you. So what this ends up looking like is get secret demo. It's like totally unreadable, but I think you can see like it's actually giving you all the info you need to connect to my hamster MySQL instance there. So what's cool now is that I made I modified the upstream Helm chart for WordPress to, instead of like assume certain things, I added like a couple values so that I could put in like inject parameters like the name of the database and the user, because there's a little bit of assumptions going on. And these are like small changes that the upstreams probably would be okay with. I don't know, we'll see. But it just lets me then pass in these parameters wholesale. So then when I can do something like, I'm not gonna run it because it's a little slow, but basically you can run Helm install, I call it minipress, and it references this local WordPress that's been plumbed to work a little bit better with minibroker. So like it doesn't assume which broker you're hitting, stuff like that. So you can switch it out to like something else, like Azure. And then what that ends up looking like is, so I have like, this was actually made by just that standard Helm chart without any magic for me. So it filled everything out that it needed. And if I go to WordPress, no. I actually have a live WordPress that hit that and was all provisioned, which is pretty cool. So I'm just finishing up getting it working for the charts. And then I have people from like SIG apps who are kind of looking at this too. Matt Farina is really interested in trying this as well. And he suggested this may be something that instead of having to be an OSB kit, that it may be a Kubernetes SIGs thing instead. So I just wanted to throw that out there, not to decide today, but for y'all to think about, because evidently I'm the only contributor right now, and it would be a lot easier to make it a SIG service catalog repo if it gets donated before anyone else contributes. So I was reading over what Paul, your PR last week, to try to figure out how to do that. But just because it seems like if we want this to be something that's owned by the community and not me, it may find a better home there than in the OSB kit. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I've been asking myself whether I want to donate stuff to OSB kit, whether it's really the right place to put it. But yeah, I am glad that you have found the pull request that I opened useful.
Yeah, well, I think it would be good to do, and I like the warnings about how it works. And to be honest, I'd rather have my code somewhere that there's an active community of people looking to help out with stuff, as opposed to a one-off org that we made with a cute name, but no one's aware of. Because I really want this to not be Carolyn's thing 6 months from now. I'd like it to be everyone's thing, because some of my plans for Minibroker is getting it to the point where it's the way you can try out Service Catalog without paying anybody money. Because right now you've got to either use UPS, which is too simple to really help you understand Service Catalog, and all the other ones require you to have a real cloud provider somewhere and you're paying the money. So this would be a nice way for people to try it. It could maybe be like a Minikube plugin eventually if it ever became stable enough for that. So it'd be easier for people to get it into their cluster and play with it. And would also let us try out some of the, whenever we have optional changes like adheres to and things like that for OSB, this may be like a place for us to kind of demonstrate to the other brokers what that would look like and see the UX. Even if it doesn't even get upstream, it's a place where we can try it on a broker where everyone can look at it.
So this, just to make sure that I understood the demo correctly,
Yeah.
this takes Helm charts and turns them into services, right?
Correct.
Cool.
It's basically like, I think Google made this. Aaron made this with something called Steward a couple years ago. This is just another effort on the same thing that maybe got a little farther on today's Service Catalog. And Scott's crying. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I think that we should probably think about for this project and for like the broker lib, whether we think that those are better fits for Kubernetes SIGs now that we know how to donate code to them. I could see trade-offs either way, but your project looks very interesting.
Thanks. So that's all I have unless anyone else had questions. Jonathan?
I would err on the side of including it with OSB-related things, if only because it forces us to make it not like as not Kubernetes specific as possible, which I think is a good thing if we're talking about the broker side of the spec.
Are you talking about Paul's client or Minibroker? Because Minibroker is only, I mean, it is Kubernetes.
Paul's client thing.
Okay. Cool. Next up, Jay has a demo of Health Check.
All right. I'll screen share if I guess it's Morgan. Can you stop? There you go. Thanks. So let's see. This pull request 1904. There was a discussion at the SIG meeting 2 weeks ago, the face-to-face. Basically, what we did was we wanted to create another tool to help monitor catalog in a deployment. You know, a lot of people are using Prometheus to pull metrics, monitor, generate alerts, that kind of thing of Kubernetes components, and Service Catalog is one of those. We have some metrics in Service Catalog, but we thought that by creating an additional standalone component which exercises Service Catalog and exercises a, you know, basically a test or a no-op broker, we'd get some end-to-end flows going and so the health check would do that, and it would also expose some metrics which you could in turn pull from Prometheus or scrape from Prometheus. Real basically on Prometheus, the way that works is if your application has some metrics, it can expose them through the Prometheus client API, or you could do it, you know, through your own, you could dummy it up yourself. It's not very complex. An example of it is like here. This is our, oh, sorry, that's the, let me try that again. Yeah, those are the few metrics that we're exposing from Service Catalog. They're very rudimentary. You can see we got a couple of brokers here that we're exposing. It says that we've got 1 class in the OSB stub, 11 in the template service broker, and goes on and shows plan count, and then we list the OSB requests that we've made and the responses that we've had back on those.
So just to be clear, these are metrics from the catalog itself, right?
That's correct. Sorry, what I'm trying to do here is show you what the extension point looks like for Prometheus metrics. So this is just hitting the endpoint for the service catalog controller. So likewise, with the health check metrics, you get something very similar. Again, you got a metric name followed by a count or whatever. If we pop over to this terminal, you can see I've got the health check running here. It's a native application. You can run it either as a pod or a native app. Enables you to do some debug or whatever if you want natively. This is running in verbose mode. Normally it doesn't print this much, but again, this helps for determining what's going on. If we take a look at this from the Prometheus side, so this is the Prometheus, which I've also got installed in Cube. This is showing the targets that we're currently scraping. If we come down here, we can see on the service endpoints, here is the catalog controller. And if I click on that, again, you can see the metrics that Prometheus is going to scrape. Down at the very bottom, I've got the catalog health check added. And again, if you click on that link, you're going to see those metrics. If I get back into Prometheus itself, this is the Prometheus query language up here. And what I'm showing here is the duration, how long it takes for the health check tool itself to run. And you can see, let me get a graph here. You can see at the 99th percentile for the health check completed, we're running in, under 3 seconds all the time, generally about 2.5 seconds. And you can zero in on the 90th percent quantile or the 50th percent quantile. Those are programmable, so you could set those to whatever you want. We've got those additional metrics that I kind of showed at the start that you can set up here. And these are, it's showing you a list of the metrics that are available. Service catalog, these top two are coming from the catalog along with the OSB request count. Other ones that have health in them are obviously coming from the health check tool. So on the Prometheus side, you can monitor these. You can alert if things take too long or if your error counts get too long, that kind of thing. I've got, I'll update the pull request. I think at the SIG service meeting, there was a request to take it out of the test folder, move it up into bin. So I've done that and made a couple of changes. I'll get that pushed right after the meeting. So basically, I'm looking to get some eyes on the pull request and get some feedback. I don't know if there's any feedback that people want to give at this point. Well, I guess since I'm blabbering, I had a hard time running this under Cube with local cluster up. If I start hitting it hard or with too many iterations, my controller starts restarting. I fail health checks, that kind of thing. The demo I'm doing here, I really got the frequency cranked up. I'm running every 11 seconds, and I'm under OpenShift. Again, same resource. It's all on my laptop, but it runs fine there. I don't understand what's going on with the local cluster up. I'll make it on Minikube and see if I get something different there.
So that might be something maybe you and I can set aside a couple hours and look at, Jay.
Yeah, great.
I had a quick question about, you said you'd like reviews, but you also said you have a change pending. Should we hold off until that gets pushed?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get it pushed for the next 20 minutes here.
Okay.
Thanks. So I meant to do it ahead of time. Things got bogged down. So thanks for the time. That's all I had.
Cool. That's great. I just want to put in another plea for someone to review my secrets in SVCat describe, because I'd like to merge it. And then Doug is up next with brainstorming.
Yeah, I thought we might have some extra time, and luckily we do. So I want to bring up two different use cases to get some opinions on people on some recommendations on how to solve it. The first one is hopefully the easier of the two. So we have a situation where we have a resource controller that is watching for new service instances to be created. And upon them being created, we want to take some action. And in order to perform that action, we need some extra parameters to be passed in for this action to do its job properly. Does anybody have any recommendations on where inside of a service instance we can stick this extra data? Because right now, we were originally thinking of sticking them in the parameters section, and then the broker could just ignore the thing that doesn't understand, because hopefully it won't recognize these things. But that seems like a real hack to me. And so this actually might be more of a Kubernetes question than a service catalog question. But has anybody ever run into a situation like this or have any recommendation?
Do you have to have it on that actual instance, or could you put like a config map and associate it to it?
I think it has to be part of it, because even if we did a config map, we'd still have to have a pointer from the service instance to the config map, right? Because otherwise you'd have to search every single config map to see if there's a pointer to the server, to some random service instance. I'm not sure how you get that correlation.
So like minibroker doesn't have a backing store for all of it, and the way it gets its persistence is that, say, when you do a provision, I make a config map that's just named after the instance, that UUID, and then I know how to find it because I've got an instance, and I just do a get on config map for the name of the instance, and then I see all that extra metadata.
No, what we want to be able to do is we want to have some random user create a service instance with these extra parameters, and we don't want to have them go off and create a separate config map someplace else and name them the same and do some hacky correlation between the two. Annotation. Can you put random crap in an annotation, like an entire object, or does it have to be a string?
It's just a string.
Yeah. So we'd have to do one annotation per parameter then. That is an interesting idea, Michael.
You could flatten it and use like dot notation to flatten it out, so you could have one per each one, and then you'd be able to rehydrate it that way too.
That's an interesting idea.
Terraform and flatmap. Flatmap's what it's called if you want to look at and see what that looks like.
Okay. I'm sorry, Michael, were you going to say something in there?
I said you could store the entire parameter payload as JSON inside an annotation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Okay, that's an interesting idea. Let me look at annotations. Okay. All right, cool. Give me some ideas to think about. Thank you. All right, next one. This one's harder. So we have a situation where we're going to basically be managing thousands of Kubernetes clusters. The maintenance nightmare of trying to keep thousands of mini little service catalogs in sync with a global service catalog, in essence, or a catalog of services, is just a problem that is just astronomical, right? As you remove and add services from the global catalog, the idea of managing 9,000 clusters and trying to manage those, all and keep them all in sync with the master one sounds like it's going to be a maintenance nightmare, and it's a pain in the ass. I'm sorry, a pain in the tuchus. We were kind of wondering if anybody else is running into a similar problem, because one solution that we've been toying with is the notion of not storing a catalog in every single Kubernetes cluster, but rather allowing Kubernetes to query something external to the cluster to get the list of services and plans and stuff like that. But before we went too far, I was wondering if anybody else has run into this problem and wants to brainstorm with us or not. Or is everybody perfectly content in updating 9,000 Kubernetes clusters every single time a single service is added, or a single plan is added? That seems like a real pain in the ass. Sorry.
But it's not manual, right? If you have, say, one broker instance that all 9,000 point to, when they relist, they'll just get it.
It's not a question Well, it depends. There are different situations. I've heard cases where people have a single broker, and then you got to do a relist, and even that doing the relist, it's going to be computationally intensive across 9,000 clusters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just trying to do a diff. But I've also heard cases where people say, I'm not going to have a single broker for all thousands of services I have, right? I'm going to actually have one broker per service, because they want to allow a self-service model where a service broker, in essence, registers themselves with a platform, and then that broker then gets registered with every single, 9,000 instances of Kubernetes, right? And you want to be able to remove things and add things without having to necessarily relist all services that are aggregated into this gigantic cluster or into this gigantic service catalog. So the last thing we do it.
So Doug, is the pressure, like, you don't want 9,000 individual clusters hitting a single broker? Like, what, or is it managing that many catalogs at scale? Like, what's the part that needs help?
So it's a little bit of both, right? We don't necessarily want to have all 9,000 clusters have to hit a single catalog and then have to do this diff every single time. But it's also, if you turn the problem around, right? Well, let me rephrase this. It depends on how you choose to set up your environment, right? If you choose to have I'm not thinking this right. Hold on a second. Let me think about this before I say it. Okay, let me back up. Yeah, I think right now it's more of a problem of the platform having to hit either the one or many brokers, and then having to do a diff across all 9,000 Kubernetes clusters. Yes. It'd be a whole lot easier if we could just manage the catalog globally, and then when someone wants to query the catalog, they can go to that external source rather than having to keep it all basically locally within each cluster.
So I have some experience in this in a previous life, managing regional catalogs for a video game, and there's no good answer. You have to decide if you're going to use push or pull, and then you have to layer in your caching strategies. So right now, Service Catalog pulls every some odd seconds or minutes or whatever you configure it to.
Right.
And if your broker's getting overloaded, then you've got to add some caching, or like I said, maybe a CDN or something. It's actually a real idea. You could hijack that request and cache it in some other thing that helps you proxy the broker or something.
Yeah, so I'm not sure caching is going to help us, because chances are when the global catalog gets updated, we would probably go through and poke all 9,000 Kubernetes clusters, get them to all relist, and then they're all going to want to relist. And so it's not a matter of caching at that point. It really is 9,000 brand new requests that have to get answered. Well, I guess the first one does and the other cache, I guess what you're saying.
You do that with a little bit of salt, where you say, everybody relist, but here's your random seed to wait, so you don't DDoS yourself.
Yeah. See, the other, and I didn't want to mention this, but I think I might have to. The other issue the other aspect of this is we have kind of a complicated strategy by which different services are visible to different platforms, for lack of a better phrase. Sometimes it's a whitelist, sometimes it's a blacklist, sometimes it's some other rationale. And not all of those rules are necessarily expressible within Kubernetes. I know that is it whitelist or blacklist now? I can't remember which one, or both.
It's both, or it could be a direct, like this equals that kind of list.
Yeah, and I think we have more complicated scenarios in mind, and in particular, when you also start thinking about how not all platforms even support all those types of mechanisms. Like, for example, Cloud Foundry doesn't support blacklist or whitelist. And then we also support service catalog type stuff for things like straight Docker, right? So we start talking about all these various platforms. A long time ago, we had decided to not try to inject this logic into the platform itself, because they all didn't support it. So we decided to inject it at a different layer, which is why you see some of our brokers doing business logic in terms of accepting or rejecting changes to instances and stuff like that. And so it'd be nice if we could do this same kind of logic of, you know what, we don't want the platform to have to manage all these different strategies for what's exposed to who and when. We want to be able to do it ourselves in one particular spot outside of Service Catalog. And that's another reason why I think it'd be nice to be able to have the query mechanism go outside of Service Catalog and let the business logic determine who can see what when, and not have to try to encode it all inside Kubernetes defined rules, if that makes sense.
Okay, one last option is you could you'd use Kubernetes directly and inject the catalog result into every place the broker is running, or the service catalog is running. So you don't let service catalog create the Kubernetes objects.
Say that one more time, you lost me.
Don't use service catalog to relist. Do it manually.
Oh, I see what you mean. So basically we would, it's a push model. Global into each 9,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now you don't have 9,000 requests. You can have some sort of like batched logic to inject that into all your clusters.
Yeah, and that's actually the reason I had to step myself back earlier, was because I was thinking about the push model, and I think we'd still have a similar issue with, you still now have to keep 9,000 things in sync with the global catalog, and as you said, it's basically push versus pull. But either way, you still have this hassle of keeping two things in sync. Global on one side, all 9,000 on the other side. And it's just a maintenance nightmare to keep everything happy at that point. It's asking for things to get out of sync. And we're trying to avoid that problem. And so what I was trying to wonder is, one, brainstorm for ideas, and thank you, Scott, for brainstorming a little. But also just in general, do other people foresee having this particular problem? Because it doesn't seem like having 9,000 copies of the exact same thing in one environment, like all of Bluemix or all of Google Cloud or whatever, is a very nice solution.
I think Google, from the Google side, we're okay with this because the customer can annotate those objects how they see fit. They're in control of it.
So you anticipate people wanting to be able to annotate service classes?
Exactly. Like, let's say we move down the road where we support the defaults. You're going to want to have control over that, and it's per customer, per namespace.
So I'm just really fascinated by this use case. So what do you do during a relist? As things come and go, do you expect the user to sort of monitor that and annotate them themselves, and a relist won't wipe out users' personal annotations?
It depends on how you implement the annotations. Some people are using CRDs to wrap the service catalog stuff, and that wouldn't blow it away. It becomes their trouble to try to repoint to the original wrapped object.
Interesting.
But what you're asking about is, how do you scale a large distributed system? And I think the answer is more computers.
More money too, yeah. Okay. Anybody else foresee having this problem, or what they're planning on doing about anything similar to it?
This may be a question that comes up in Azure, but it's not one we have right now.
Okay.
Because at the moment, we just do one broker, one catalog per cluster.
Right. Okay. All right, that was it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the brainstorming.
Cool. Well, that's our agenda, fully executed.
What about the logo? The logo.
Didn't put the logo on the list, man. Do you want to brainstorm on the logo somewhere? Can we use what you posted?
We could use, like if we draw it right, we could, I think maybe, if the group likes it, come on. Kibbles loves it.
It's the last one you posted. It was black. With
I mean, it doesn't have to be black, but that general idea, like a pizza shape.
Yeah. We won't. I was just curious because I know Paul was saying something about like people with trademarks and lawyers being mad or something. I don't know.
Well, we can ask a lawyer or mad people.
Yeah. I think for this one will probably be okay because it would just be using the heptagon.
Yeah,
which is like you can't trademark a fundamental symbol like that.
Let me
But
see if I can get a link. Here we go. Paste it in chat. I'm more curious on, do people like it or hate it or have a different idea?
Do you still want to make it look like a paw print?
That's what I'm going for. I'm kind of like trying to blend the idea of a paw print and a system diagram.
I think if it had a little, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if you want to look more like a paw print, I would have the upper triangles not go all the way down to the center of the shape, and then instead of having straight edges along the top, they would be rounded, so they'd be a little more circular, like real toe beans. It would still overall make the right shape, but it would look a little bit more like the thing you're going for. Because right now I don't see the paw in it.
Or, ask Twitter or something. I don't know.
I'm gonna try my hand at it later.
A little more space in between each of the objects, and then I think you could have an extra bordering heptagon to make it extra clear it's contained within something, and I think then it would look quite like a paw print.
Well,
and
I spent a whole 5
blue,
minutes on it.
Yeah.
I just want to
Okay.
I think either blue or pink, but probably blue for Kubernetes-esque.
Yeah, I
Also,
think we should
everything
rip
else is
off the blue. The outline is really great because then that gives you the right shape that you want, but lets us play with the inside of it so that it looks like a paw print.
Yeah.
I'm going to give that a try later today. See if I can, I don't know. I'm not very good, but I have some vector graphic stuff I can try.
If you want my garbage SVC, I can, or SVC, yeah. Let me know. I can send it to you.
Yeah, send it to me. I'll use it as a starting point.
It's 100% trash though, so sorry.
It's okay.
All right. That's all I have.
Cool. Okay, now our agenda is fully executed. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye.